It is something that sort of stands as an empirical ward of evil, this very maternal, motherly type of tree that exists. And, you think about it, when you're walking through a moonlit forest at night, the ones that you can see are likely the white birch, the paper birch, the silver birch in these northern parts of Europe. And one of the reasons why it's called a way shower or a pioneer tree, you can sort of mark your way through the woods that way. You tie a ribbon or something around the trees, you can help navigate the way you need to go. But yeah, so a lot of warding involved here, and especially with something so big as cancer, being able to fight that. I mean, you see that like superstition never really go away as it finds new meaning in these times, and we have new validation for it as well, Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Tuatro Fra. This is Raudas, and we've got Nathaniel here. We got a couple other people joining us today. Today, I thought it'd be a good idea in that mindset of doing practical work as modern heathens and modern neo-druids, things like that, or just, modern animists of trying to resurrect the spiritual and cultural ways of our ancestors, both in Germanic and Celtic forms. So that we'd start doing a little session of tree and herb lore, as everybody in the Discord has voted on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through maybe today about maybe 3 or 4 trees of the Ogham arrangement and going in order, but they also have an herb that is culturally significant or medicinally or shamanically tied to that tree. So the one thing I wanted to do first, and since this is more of like I forgot to say, thanks for coming to the Authing Grove chat. This is where we like to do a lot of reading as well. So anybody in the Discord wants to share a topic or start a discussion, we're always open to doing reading straight from the sources, straight from books. But I wanted to start by reading about something within this book right here. It's known as the Heathen Golden Dawn. And it's an interesting concept on the Golden Dawn perspective from like a heathen's viewpoint. And one of the sections in here that I found pretty interesting, this was also made by, this is done by Isaac Hill, but it was also helped in production by John Michael Greer, who, love him or hate him, he's pretty good at his research, and he's a pretty interesting guy to listen to, and he did a lot for opening me up spiritually. But there's a section in this, and like I said, for anybody here, just feel free to chime in with anything you need to. There's a section here that I want to read. It's not too long, that actually kind of goes over the basic principles of creating decoctions and teas and the like. So it's a good, I think in this book, which goes through many, many different practices, this is the alchemical practice of the heathen Golden Dawn. Most other Golden Dawn traditions, like the Celtic, they have an alchemical practice themselves, working with minerals. But for this one, it's herb craft. So I thought this would be good to read. So I'm going to start now by saying, now how does one actually make an herbal remedy? For the ancient herbalists, there were 2 basic ways of using herbs medicinally. The first is internally, by boiling the herb in water or wine and drinking it as a tea. The second is externally, by infusing the herb in some sort of fat and applying it to the skin as a salve, or mashing up the herb and applying it as a poultice. There are, of course, other ways and more complicated ways to make remedies. Many herbalists these days use tinctures, for instance, but this is just infusing an herb in alcohol, which is a form of the first kind of remedy. In a lot of cases, people will get organic vodka. That's what they'll use to make the tinctures with. These days also, when many people think of the word tea, they think of a small bag steeped in for a few minutes in a cup. And that might taste nice, but it's not a very strong medicine. A true herbal infusion should use a large amount of herbs and steep for at least 20 minutes, if not 4 hours or overnight. A good recipe for this is to put an ounce of dried herbs in a quart jar and just add just past boiling water. Cover with a lid and let it sit for 4 hours. Then strain and drink. This is best used for herbs that come in the form of leaves and flowers. So like essentially what that's saying there is when people make the teas, you're actually making just like a large quantity of herbs, which everything that's discussed here, I want everyone to make sure that they do their own research and make sure that you are paying attention to what you're putting in your body and making sure that that's a healthy solution for you. Always do your research beforehand. It'll make you a better herbalist. It'll make you a better alchemist, and you'll learn more about it. So don't just take everything that I say and say, oh, I'm just going to drink a bunch of mugwort, because that can actually be bad. Especially pregnant mothers, please be careful. So yeah, getting a large quantity of herbs, you can look up recipes for this type of thing, and that is really one of the best ways to like flood your system with those herbal properties, and not just drinking a simple teaspoon of whatever herb. But going on, moving into decoctions, there's also the herbal decoction, where one boils down herbs in a pot and to make a strong drink. To make a true decoction, you must boil down the herb for at least 20 minutes. 2 hours is even better. You want the water to at least boil down halfway, and this is best for herbs that come in the form of dried roots, barks, and mushrooms. A salve is made by infusing herbs in some kind of a lipid, where whether olive oil or bear fat. I'm sure other fats should serve the same purpose, but one way to infuse more delicate herbs, such as St. John's wort, is to put the fresh, cut up herb in a jar and pour over with oil. Keep it in a sunny window for a month, then use. So that's like if you're making something that's going to be tonically applied externally in some way. And another way to make a big tea bag, another way is to make a big cheese bag out of cheesecloth around herbs such as comfrey, calendula, and put them in a crock pot of oil. Leave the crock pot on low for at least a day and making sure it doesn't burn. A legendary Appalachian herbalist Tommy Boss, or Bass, who came from a family of herbalists within the English heritage, would boil herbs and oil it and outside to make his famous salve. To make the salve, often herbalists use beeswax. Yeah, you can add beeswax to that oil as well to make it more firm. But that, for anybody who didn't get lost in my pronunciation, is just like a basic introduction to the teas, decoctions, salves, tinctures. Always do more research.
So on the tea front, that the first thing that kind of popped into my head when you were reading off the like time scales needing to be at least 20 minutes at a minimum, and then preferably 4 hours or overnight and that kind of thing for what's going on there. I'm wondering if the first thought that came across to me would be like the Japanese tea ceremony and how like much there's like regimented into it and the practice that goes into it and like, how it all plays out. By doing it that way, it makes things take much longer too. And I'm wondering if that was just something that was built in order to make it so that way it would inevitably take longer.
Oh, like so the custom developed around the actual functional practice.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no clue. It was just the first like, I wonder if that's a thing.
I mean, I
Idea
absolutely, yeah,
popped
I
in my head.
absolutely think that could be a thing, considering like like that could be, because in a lot of this research that I've done here on a lot of these plants and stuff like that, it's also about honoring like a plant spirit, stuff that kind of goes deeper into the metaphysical than I usually dive. But I do believe that it's just like it's one of those inherent things that when we take our time and we have like a respect, like the Japanese would for craft such as that, right? And like the enjoyment of tea as well, and we have a respect for it. We have a patience, and we're not just guzzling it down, like we're at a football game or something. You when you offer respect to the earth, you actually get the most out of it, and I think that's
I'm
just a
certain that that was part of it. I just don't know. I mean, that what you're saying now is absolutely the point of it. I'm just wondering if there was another layer
Hmm.
with the making of it go slow on purpose because it makes it so that way it also
Yeah,
like
instead of
can keep
instead of
long.
sitting around asking and talking about the weather, they waiting for the tea to steep and everything. Trees that are on the chopping block, so to speak, is birch. Birch is the first one to appear in the Ogham. It's very significant in both the Celtic and Norse culture. So, and a lot of this is actually a Betulaceae. That's the type of tree species that it is. This or Betula. And so a lot of the symbolism in both cultures is actually new beginnings, purification, renewal, and it's often described as a pioneer tree. It colonizes barren land and is used primarily for tools, paper, medicine, more like fine instruments in a way, because it's actually quite light, the wood. Having worked with it a lot, I can tell you that it's good for like delicate type of work, but it doesn't last very long. The thing is that it lives about 80 years and grows at the forest line. And what it'll do is it's actually very, very saturated. And after about 60 years, it gets to the point where if it's not growing straight up, it's growing out like a yew tree of some sort. It breaks, and it like intentionally breaks and intentionally falls because it actually is full of rich oils inside of it that actually are part of the reason it burns so well and why it's so flammable, even when it's wet in a lot of cases. It's filled with all this oil. And as I said before, it grows on tree lines. So it's called a pioneer tree because it's always growing at the edge of the forest and dying and creating the essential matter for other trees and other life forms to expand the forest through. It's literally like it's called a mother tree because of that sacrifice that it creates in its growth and expansion. It grows and it dies, and its offspring or its followers kind of come after it in a way. So birch is like one of those essential trees for most ecosystems. There's usually a Bechelisi in most parts of Northern Europe. But then going a bit further, let's see. So another interesting thing about it is that the sap is huge. A lot of people will make like healing tonics out of the sap, and they'll make it in Appalachia. It was referred to as birch beer. It's a lot like root beer. It's like kind of like a sassafras flavor or whatever. But going into medicinal uses, you'll hear about why that's so good. It's I think everybody's heard about the Scandinavian, or actually I think these were the Finnish I think the Finns were the ones that were actually the ones that flogged people with the birch leaves in saunas. Have you ever heard about those?
Yeah, I have a little bit.
I mean, that's still a tradition even to this day, but going on for more of the medicinal properties of it, the leaves from early spring are used as a laxative tea. So you can gather leaves up and they actually clear out the kidney and bladder sediments. So, if anybody's experiencing, difficult times working, in that process, I guess you can make a tea out of the leaves in the early spring. And then you can also gargle those to heal up mouth sores. And it's a slight sedative as well. So if you're the kind of person that goes to the gym or you're getting active or anything like that, you can actually make something like a tea. You can make like a birch bark tea or potentially a salve in some way that you can actually apply to your muscles, or if somebody that has like lower back pain or something, you could potentially make a salve over time and use that at night to kind of create a natural muscle relaxer. I know this is probably so riveting to everybody just to go through all these medicinal properties, but I find it fascinating and I love talking about these things. And but going through it a bit more, it's actually really, really good for gout and arthritis. Like it's been, and it's because it's recently been found out that it contains betulinic acid that's within the sap, and it can actually help prevent tumors. So birch actually has been part of a lot of studies recently to help prevent people who have developing cancers and tumors and other types of growths within their body. You can actually stay those away by having the sap either as a salve or circulating within the system. It also grows the infamous chaga mushroom that we always hear about, which that's a powerful one right there. And this is also used in anti-cancer treatments and tumor prevention. So if you're getting your hands like I'm not gonna give medical advice here or anything like that, but I mean it's pretty incredible that we have these solutions here in the natural world to kind of do that preventative work, and that's a big part of dealing with this. And I think that's really important now because you have so many people now are coming like forward with somebody they know who's dealing with that battle. Like I recently had it with my dad, and we've got friends in our discords that are dealing with that, and people at work, everyone at work.
Someone that lives with me is dealing with it. So
yeah, and it's like we got to start. That's why I think it's important to talk about this, because we can make this part of the conversation that people have and all that modern stuff. But getting to the go ahead.
On one thing really briefly is that you have on the Nordic side for what's going on there, you have where Burkana is the rune for birch, and one of the things that birch and Burkana the rune is associated with, specifically the birch tree, though, it is Freya the goddess. It's her tree.
Oh, yeah.
So, that kind of gives a little insight into her as well as into the tree itself, with the associations that were made with the Nordic people, at least.
Well, in this part here, because I actually include with each herb and tree, I include a section that is has like Celtic spiritual significance and Norse, and even shamanic uses in both cultures. And
so I'm jumping the gun a little bit. Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. I love it that you're chiming in because it kind of keeps it organic. But yeah, it's actually related with Frigg and Freya, and it symbolizes the motherhood and the frailty of motherhood in some cases. But it's the other interesting about it and why culturally it was so unique is because they actually believed that there was this sort of protective quality that was instilled in birch. It also was used in a lot of different practices, like to ward off evil. Like torches were built from it. Entryways, signs for graveyards were made from birch, and a lot of like signposts were made from birch.
I'm
To
wondering if
kind of
that's because of the association that you talked about earlier with it being a pioneer tree. It's the guardian of the forest, is what they can see when it's there. It's always at the edge of the forest, so to speak, for what's going on there. So a natural association, perhaps, you know?
there's that, and then also the favorite tree to use to make like baby cradles, which I'm guessing they would have maybe taken like a log of it and they would have just like kind of hollowed a piece of it out and they put like little stilts on it. They used birch. So birch was like
It's soft too. Yeah.
and it's soft as well. And it's interesting because the next tree we go into, it's interesting because you'll start seeing like these different superstitions in both these cultures in a way, or not really superstitions, but these beliefs. Like when we move on into the Rowan, they would actually leave Rowan sticks or logs in the cradle with children to so that the fairies would grab the Rowan rather than the because of the
child.
rather than the child, right? So if you're having a kid, get a birch cradle, put a little Rowan in there, and then I think they'll be just fine. But moving a bit more through the rest of this, I'll finish up some medicinal parts. There was the flogging for people who had chronic pain. And this part's important why I was joining this with the herb that it has. But it actually helps with the joints and the muscles to get that flogging done. And you got to be sweating so that it actually gets in underneath your skin and in your pores, things like that.
As you say, the pores got to be open, yep.
And then the lashing sort of helps that sink in a bit. But then also in some in like a Sami tribes and even in some Celtic tribes, the elder, they would get moistened leaves of the birch, I'm guessing at like the springtime, and they would actually wrap the elderly in them to soothe the aching joints and like the chronic pains and all that sort of stuff. So there was a practice to actually just wrap them in bundles of these leaves and just pile them up on people, which I just thought was kind of a pretty idea. But in the Celtic culture, it was related to Bridget and springtime. It was definitely used in Beltana rituals, cleansing. The twigs were used to form besoms or basums and sweeping out negativity. And that's probably where you can see some of that flogging that happens there. But in all cases, like we were talking about with the signposts being made of birch, it is something that sort of stands as an empirical ward of evil, this very maternal, motherly type of tree that exists. And, you think about it when you're walking through a moonlit forest at night, the ones that you can see are likely the white birch, the paper birch, the silver birch in these northern parts of Europe. And another reason why it's called a way shower or a pioneer tree. You can sort of mark your way through the woods that way. You tie a ribbon or something around the trees, you can help navigate the way you need to go. But yeah, so a lot of warding involved here, and especially with something so big as cancer, being able to fight that. I mean, you see that like superstition never really go away as it finds new meaning in these times, and we have new validation for it as well, So then moving on, birch was also considered in certain Celtic practices, it was considered usable for portals, like crossing through like V-shape parts of the tree would actually help purify you on a journey. It actually, is there something that you can add to that one?
It's the V shape.
Well, see, then there you go.
Specifically for what's going on here. This is the ancient symbol for womanhood, or the womb, for what's going on there. And of course, pagans specifically, non-pagan groups too, associated sex with being able to take them to a next existential state and therefore a higher realm.
Nirvana and all that, yeah.
There, and the womb, vaginal canal, and the womb were a portal and whatnot. The one for life, and the other one for other aspects of that. So you have the V shape playing out here as that specific thing of going on. It ties back to that motherhood notion.
I didn't even think about that part. I didn't even think about that. It's so crazy just to see like all these like fractals of reality playing out in the natural world. That's crazy. Let's see. I'll wrap up the birch. It was considered like they would do this thing called seining or shining. It's a Celtic term. It's AINING. I'm going to have to get better at these Celtic pronunciations, start writing them in. But it's like a form of smudging in a way. And they would burn the birch twigs or the sap itself. And that was done before taking otherworld journeys or doing what you would consider like a shamanic work or druidical work
Go
with.
to a noon.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, maybe we can do a video one day where you can maybe express more about otherworld
Sure. Briefly,
stuff.
it literally means, like, depending upon the scholar and whatnot, there's two interpretations for that etymological meaning of the word. It literally means not a world, so not of this world, aka the other world, as we use it as a term for what it is, or very deep, which both fit perfectly in terms of its meaning for what's going on there.
Very deep. That's interesting because is the other world considered like a subterranean type world or a beneath the sea type world?
It can be. It doesn't have to be for what's going on there. That is definitely an element that's going on. It literally is just so. If you go with like the typical three-tier system, let's say, I'm not saying that these are the only realms that exist. I'm just saying like you have the heavenly realms that are above, you have the underworld that's here, and then you have the middle world, Midgard, and whatnot here for what's going on with that. That literally just means anything that's not of this physical world, technically speaking. But a lot of times where a lot of the journeys and a lot of the stories go aren't necessarily up into these higher ethereal realms, at least not initially. Where you get all of the wisdom, where you get all of the journeys that have to go down with it, it's usually down in the deep underworld for what's going on there. Hence why I think that's also why it's typically associated with that particular notion. But that part's a little speculative on my part. I do know the etymological roots for two of the major ones for it are those two things, though. So
I was going to say, I know that I've read certain things in this one book that I'm going through right now that talk about, it hasn't gone fully into detail, but it's kind of explained like the Celtic understanding of how the other worlds kind of like exist around us in a way.
yeah,
Am I,
yes.
and that's interesting to think about how it plays in with, or, we're thinking about the Nordic concept of realms or
So
layers of
technically,
existence.
anything that is not Midgard, right?
Yeah.
Not Middle Earth in the Nordic preconception of things with it. Anything that's not of this physical domain is part of the other world, ostensibly. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, but that's the other thing. That's one thing that in the video that I'm working on that is coming, that is kind of where energy flows through as well. And working with trees and working with these other types of living beings that are a part of the earth, being there's only
the
so much we can do
Awen,
to what's that?
the Awen.
Yeah, the Awen, yeah. And it's the idea of inspiration, all that sort of stuff. But it's the other aspect about working with like plants and taking these things into your life rather than the synthetics is that you do tie yourself to things that exist in other planes of reality. I mean, you think about the nature or the existence of a tree, it's been proven that trees do have the ability to visually see things around them in the form of just like very vague color, like not through like an eye sense or anything like that, but they do have an intelligence that is able to like understand reflective light and understand that there are figures around them. Now, is their perception as quick as ours or as sophisticated? No, but that's the thing. It's showing that there are other levels of perception existent in the world, and there are ways to access otherworldly knowledge using these devices or these existing things like plants and herbs and trees and that sort of thing to connect with these types of realms. But that's a topic for another time. But
Yep,
just to wrap up,
let's not derail.
I know I'm already doing it. So essentially, with the birch, if you're going to use it in a shamanic way, use it for cleansing. The sap and the twigs are great for that. Even just certain rituals, not even really rituals, but doing work for yourself and your own body to sort of cleanse your body and repair your body before you go on any type of physical journey or spiritual journey. It's always good to sort of address the little pains and maybe do some cleansing with what birch has to offer. Now, for the plant that I offered, or the herb I offered with birch, I think we're only going to get through two of these, is actually nettle. So I paired nettle with this one because there is an action that directly relates to what happens with the birch. And this is something I have experienced and something I learned about when I was living on a bee sanctuary. You can actually take the nettle and you can flog yourself with that, similar like you would do with the. Go ahead.
Is it the same thing as the stinging nettle, or is it something
Yes.
else? Okay, no, I just want
Yes,
to
the
make.
stinging nettle. Yeah. And people are coming around to understanding like how great it actually is. It's kind of a super plant in a way. It can grow in pretty much any type of environment where it has like dead green matter. You know, if you wanted to start a nettle patch or really expand it, all you have to do is just go through and just clear out some of the material that you don't want. You know, I always want to be respectful of what you're clearing, but if you're purposeful with it, um, then it's usually a good thing. But nettle, people actually flog themselves with nettle, similar to how they do with the birch twigs, birch branches, and all that sort of stuff, because it actually can do a lot of the same stuff, and it can infuse you with things like the rich amount of iron that it has, the vitamin C, all the minerals, and help with like inflammation. So if you're someone that's suffering from like chronic back pain, you've got pain in your legs, knees, things like that, you can roll the nettle, and it's painful. It's not fun to do while it's happening, but you can find methods online where you can actually roll the nettle on affected areas and alleviate tons of pain in your knees, lower back. You can do flogging methods with it, but it's one of those things like pain and gain at the same time. And I'll try to move through this one quickly. It's actually the stinging nettles are actually a high protein plant, and so they can grow on basic compost, fallen anything really, and they produce like a very high protein rich plant. Now this is plant protein, but still good for consumption. I knew a guy that actually made tonics out of it. You can brew it similar to like you would a beer, and it's similar to how birch can be brewed as a birch beer, and you get a tonic from it. But it is such a good cleanser, the nettle and birch go together incredibly well as a cleansing and detoxifying and like sort of pain ailment remedy in a way. But let's see, healing and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, like I said, it's rich in iron and vitamin C. So, if you're running low on that stuff, you can get some supplements of nettle. I know that that's available out there. It also helps for arthritis, similar to birch. Like I said, rubbing it on the affected areas. It also helps with anemia. It can help reduce the conditions that come. What's that?
Because the iron.
Yes, because of the iron. And yeah, so it's actually been shown to do nerve repair as well. So if you might want to do some research on it, but it can help repair nerve endings. I don't think you're going to get fully repaired nerves that have been destroyed or anything like that if you've got like an electrical charge or anything, but it can help repair nerves in your body. And it's also been linked to doing organ repair. So if you're being able to take some sort of tonic or internal infusion, it has been shown to help repair organs, especially things like your lungs and stuff like that. And the other thing too,
Could be good for COVID related stuff at this stage. Then
there you go, COVID related stuff or the bird flu that we've got floating around or next month's thing, you know?
yeah,
And I'll wrap this one up with the fact that it can actually help increase. My wife did this. It can help increase the milk flow for mothers. And here's the great one, guys. And this is the same for birch. If you get a nice bit of birch sap, the nettle can also be used in this regard too. It increases the testicular function and helps with low thyroid issues. So they are linked in a way to be fertility herb and trees, you know, so you can make particular tonics. I'm sure there's some recipes online that you can give your guys a little dip in. And maybe you're getting ready for, bringing somebody into your life. You can just, treat all the parts of your body well, and give yourself the best shot in a way. So not much to go over here. I mean,
even if not, testosterone's still good. So
yeah, it's still good for you. Yeah. So and that will help with that too as well. But people with low thyroid should definitely look into finding nettle supplements or growing it on their property. And speaking of which, it was grown in a way that would guard thresholds. So in the Celtic spiritual,
playing the same role as the tree, the birch tree. Yeah.
yeah. And so that's really the see, now that you've said it, working with the V and stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty great. So yeah, being able to pass through like a nettle grove, it's considered that you can't really be followed by an evil or malevolent entity. So going through the pain of the nettle forest or the nettle patch can kind of, it does a lot for you. If you're getting it on you, if you're a traveler, and in your mind you're thinking like, oh, it's going to be painful, but it's going to get me through to my destination without being followed by evil or the hex that was placed on me by the witch or whatever. You will come out of it with a little bit of extra iron, a little bit of extra vitamin C, and you won't even know it. But yeah, so I guess in some shamanic practices, really, when I say shamanic practices, you can You don't have to go into a dungeon and, make noises or anything like that. You can do shamanic work just simply in your garden. So one thing you can do if you're looking to add a little bit of protection or give yourself a nice little patch that you can walk through every once in a while to get a little bit extra iron, cleanse yourself out, feel detoxified, plant nettle near your entryways or places that you kind of you want protection from in that direction in a way. Yes. So the last bit, I didn't mention this part, but in the Celtic culture, it was also used in baths. People would make baths in it, and it would be quite painful, but it would actually be part of that process of shamanically preparing your body and mind to go on spiritual journeys, to go on a mental journey. It helps create that clarity, focus, and grounding. And then, yes, that kind of wraps it up for the stinging nettle. For this part here as well, for the Norse, it was actually one of the 9 sacred herbs, and the nettle is burned in recanning or smudging to protect against or protect during a Seiðr. It can often be related to Thor's strength, and it can be used for shielding those who go on these types of journeys. So that was something. It's interesting. They both have some sort of work in divination.
Yeah.
So then that's it. Yeah. So, if you're going to go on a spiritual journey, you're going to go on any type of journey, birch and nettle are great for you, great for clearing you out and just setting you out in the best way possible. All right. Well, then I'll just move on into the next one. And this one you might have a bit of fun with, actually. And I'll try to move a bit quicker. I might have to work on the way I organize these things. But the next one actually is the Rowan, Sorbus acuparia. Paria. Sorbus acuparia. That would be the Latin for it. So the Rowan is an interesting tree, one that I just noticed that we've got chats in here.
Let's go over with it.
Okay, I see. All right. Dang, I feel bad. I wish he could have joined. He would have been great for this one, but we'll have plenty more. So the Rowan's a really, really amazing tree. It has this sort of it can have like a licheny kind of bark to it. Nothing too characteristic other than the fact that it grows out and has these sort of leaves that grow side by side, and they're dark. They're like a grayish at times, but among them grow the rowan berries or blood berries that are just like so vibrant, so red. And that's really where a lot of the potency of this tree is. And it's always been associated with protection, vitality, and warding off evil. And for me, I got a distinct masculine vibe from this tree. But apparently in the cultures, it's considered like a woman tree, because in the Celtic mythologies, one of the first women ever created came from a rowan, actually, which is interesting because it's known as the mountain ash. So we know in the Norse culture, we have Ask and Imbla, right? And we had and I think because it was the male was made from the ash tree in that one,
Yes.
right? And I believe, I don't recall exactly what the male tree creation was, or if it even was a tree in the Celtic side. Moving forward, the mountain ash or the rowan is actually a just incredibly vibrant tree when its berries are fully in bloom. And it's known as a guardian tree. So we have the birch is a pioneer, the rowan is a guardian. And I know we discussed some aspects of warding and all that kind of stuff. Here, it's very prevalent. It's often planted near homes to repel the malevolent forces. And in Celtic myth, the first woman was crafted by Rowan. And in a lot of cultures, it was also, or in a lot of aspects in the Celtic mythologies, people would fall underneath the Rowan tree, and that the bloodberries would actually sustain them as they were able to. And they're very bitter. They're not like a fun, enjoyable time, but
they're not like strawberries, okay? But not like strawberries.
They're definitely not like strawberries, and I haven't had the chance to try one myself, but I know a friend that has some rowan that I'm excited to get into. But it was a favorite of warriors who would find a lot of comfort being underneath these trees. So when war bands or tribal bands would set out to actually go invade other groups, they would find these mountain ash or rowan clusters, and they would sit underneath these, and they would do that devising of how they're going to go about their bloodshed, which I think is interesting because yet again, they're convening underneath a tree that has these blood red berries.
You familiar with the Matroni?
No, what's that?
Roman-esque. I say esque because there's also Celtic associations with it when the Romans conquered certain parts of Gaul and even the British Isles. So it's not totally Roman, but it's anyway. Point is that they're these ancient female figures that play the role of like guardian and like controllers of the fate and destiny and things of this particular thing. They seem to be originally actual physical women rather than like otherworldly women or like fairy folk or something like that. And that they became more deified as time went on. Regardless, though, the reason why I'm bringing them up is because you have a warrior, these warriors sitting underneath this tree. You have the blood red part that you already covered for what's going on. I can't remember if this is true for the Celtic peoples or not, but I know it is for the Nordic peoples, that the women were the ones that decided when they would go to war, but it was the men who were the ones that like had to deal with all the battle logistics and whatnot. They were the ones that were in charge of that. And if you were talking about like the masculine versus the feminine component for what's going on there, like you perceived it and felt it as a very masculine energy for the tree, but everything that you're kind of researching indicates that they in ancient times perceived it as a feminine tree. That it could be because of this particular component here, that yes, they are a feminine tree, but they have a masculine aspect to it, like an Amazonian warrior would. Right, it's still a woman, but that has a masculine component that's going on there. And if they're just having the men sit underneath these war bands, sit underneath it and holding council, literally with the tree itself, basically, they're kind of taking on that same role as it would be for these other parts that we know here that are going on with it too. And they would decide the fates of these individuals based on what they decided to do there with it too. So I'm just seeing parallels is all.
Yeah, one of the notes that I took was that I viewed it through my research as a tree that was like a wife back home or a mother that bore that person as a child. Because in so many cases, they always talk about how the blood red berries are dripping down or falling down, right? And it could just represent, so much of like, the motherly sacrifice and the blood that comes with that. And, these young men that go off to be warriors. And then it's just
Well, they're
like that
known as the
idea.
mothers. The matronae are known as the mothers. So
Oh, see, there we go. See, and that's why I can't do it without you. But one day I might have to.
hopefully not
So
for a while, brother. Hopefully not for a while. I intend to try to make this work as much as I can for you.
I think it's going good so far, and I'm really excited to see more people showing up. I think people are starting to kind of
Yeah,
come around to
there's
it.
more interest for sure.
I
Yeah.
think people are getting pretty interested, yeah. But I'll move a bit further into this because I don't want to take up too much time, and I want to try to keep the videos a bit shorter. So I think we're just going to do two. But for the medicinal, the good part, it's got astringent berries that treat diarrhea, sore throats, and digestive upset. So that's a good internal use for those berries. The bark tea, and remember, we're talking about getting like a substantial amount. And when
A handful of it, not just like a little
I would
teaspoon.
definitely I would definitely urge people to do a research based off your weight and stuff like that so that you're not using more
Yeah, of
than
course. I'm just saying like
everything
it's
would be
supposed to be a substantial amount, not just
a
like this little pint.
substantial, yes, quite the quantity. But also, I want to say here for people that when you're doing research on the types of bark that you want to get from these trees, I didn't include it for all of this, but there's inner bark, and then there's just like surface layer bark, which is not the outside, but you can just get like that inner bark, and there's like core bark. So do your research on what part of the bark you want to get, and then also make sure that you're not doing this on the actual trunk of the tree because it can kill it if you're just taking huge quantities of the trunk out of it. So this is just a brief introduction for people who want to hear these types of things, just to be interested and just stay in
Primer.
conversation.
It's a primer.
Yeah, primers, right? So then you can make a bark tea that reduces fevers and inflammation. And when I say inflammation, I'm talking about like bloating, pains in the shoulders, the arms, general discomfort within the body. That's what a lot of inflammation is. And that comes from a lot of diet too. If you're kind of person that eats wheat, eating things that help reduce inflammation, like the two trees I've mentioned, and the nettle, that's kind of what I'm talking about. But these are high. It's high in vitamin C, and the berries will boost immunity. So if you can gather these up, freeze them, and then save them for the times that people are getting sick. The interesting part about this is that the buds that grow before the leaves produce, the buds can be used in a tea to help treat depression and was great for treating symptoms of the common cold and the ear, nose, and throat infections. But the part that I mentioned there with treating the depression, that's where I'm like, okay, this is where it's seeming more like a feminine tree right here, because it's like you think about these sad warriors, or if they're making teas from the buds, things like that, and it actually lifts their spirits. It has some way of interacting with their brains chemically. It's kind of like that chemical interaction that you would have, like seeing your mother, and she's got the food on the table for you, the way mom cooked it. And, you come home and see your wife and she's happy to be with you and all this great stuff, like kind of the joy that a woman in your life can bring you and just take you out of those stages of depression. That's where I started seeing that in this tree. And let's see. So I mentioned that it can help with almost pretty much all the ear, nose, and throat stuff taken as a tea, but the berries could also be made into a jam with apples. You want to include it with apples because they're quite bitter, but you can also brew it with the apples in a wine, and it has incredible tonic properties. So here's a little bit of alcohol you can drink. A low alcohol percentage is the better one, but it tastes great, and it actually is like, you can warm it up, and it's like a warm tonic-y, like a little light alcohol drink that actually can really help with immunity and stuff like that. So moving on.
The apple part, I was just smiling because like I'm studying Arthurian tradition, and so obviously got Avalon, which is the Isle of Apples. So
well, that'll be interesting because one of the trees of the Ogham is apple, and
we'll play with that later. Yeah,
we'll get on that one later. And I don't think it was this tree, but there's another one that actually I did include some Arthurian legend in here specifically for you because it ties to that. But it's in the Celtic aspect. It was used as a protective amulet. People would wear they would carve amulets out of it, and it would be worn as garlands by women. So the men would carve amulets and make garlands, and even the women would do it for themselves, for protection, for warding off evil, things like that. And that was specifically for women. And so,
in the Hindu tradition, and I had this on my mind because we just had the solstice and whatnot. They do garlands as well, but typically one of the major ones is the roses that they have. You always see it with the roses that they do for whatever reason.
Did you say rose?
Yeah.
Nice. So I think I actually have rose in here as one of the herbs that I've chosen. Actually, I have to remember, but that's good. I like hearing. I like having the Vedic come in here because they have some interesting stuff that I think has stayed pretty closely tied to the steppe
original,
the steppe folk. But moving on, the garlands are great for that. I kind of struggle to see how you would make that with the Rowan, but for men,
they found a way.
So actually, for men, it was actually used, they would make stabs of them because they were considered useful on journeys to keep you grounded and not swept away or off the path by fairies, because like you could be put on a different path or led astray, and that a Rowan staff would actually help keep you moving in the right direction and keep the earth that you need to travel underneath you and keep you grounded to your path rather than being split elsewhere, which I thought was a cool idea. It was said to be, a resting place for warriors because it had the dark leaves, good shade, and then the berries that actually kind of uplifted them throughout their journey. And in the Norse, interesting enough, with that staff understanding in the Celtic, it's also tied to Raido's nature of journey. So Raido apparently has ties with the Rowan in certain practices because it was used as protective amulets or gear when they would go on journeys. Rowan was an important tree to take on journeys with you. And it just got tied to Raido, I guess, in Neo culture, but it was also seen as a grounding staff in Norse culture as well. Some shamanic use, obviously a protective ward, and pretty much they used it in every creative way that you could even think about. They would burn it in doorways, they would hang it over barn doors, they would have it hung above children's cribs, and like I said before, they would also place Rowan in babies' cribs, but as well, they would place them in graves. They would place like large logs of it. And there's a part that I want to mention of that. There was an interesting read in the Norse section, but I mean, pretty much every way you could think of that, they would strike cows with it. So like with the birch, they would strike cows with birch twigs to create fertility, and then with the Rowan, they would strike livestock with it to create protection in a way. And so obviously it was planted around the home, entryways, things like that to ward off evil. And also it was really great because it sustained a lot of life. Those berries create a lot of life in the type of birds that come around, the microbial activity in the soil around it. It was great for that. You just get a lot of cycling of life when you have Rowans around. Sorry, I'm trying to run through this quickly, but yeah,
Okay.
and then a lot of the other notes that I have, it's quite significant in taking Rowan with you in some fashion when you travel to the other world or engage with them. It's important to make sure that when you're dealing with spirits that you keep a bit of Rowan on you, because it can apparently confuses. It's a confusing tree to these types, these fairy types. So then, yeah, the section that I have right here, the Sacred Tree. It's this book. Let me open 27. This is in my Nordic section here when it comes to the practices that I mentioned. But actually, so this is written in the book that I have here. This one's a great resource for this because this also applies a lot of Native American concepts to the Ogham and how they used it. So it's a Druid's Herbal of Sacred. It's a Druid's Herbal of Sacred Tree Medicine, and it's by Ellen Everett Hopham. But she's done amazing work in this and just distilling it outside of its with its spiritual and its medicinal qualities. But I wanted to read briefly here. Evidence of the spiritual power of Rowan appears as far back as the Bronze Age. In Magleho, North Zealand, Denmark, a mound was excavated 1888, and the grave of a female healer was discovered. Within the mound was a stone coffin covered by a large slab of stone, with smaller stones set on top of it to protect the tomb from dirt. Inside the coffin were cremated bones wrapped in woolen clothing with a double-headed fastener, a knife, a fibula placed on top of the bundle of ashes. Close by was a bronze box decorated with star patterns. The box was filled with sorcerer's charms such as horse's teeth, weasel bones, the claw joint of a cat, possibly a lynx, bones from a young lamb or a deer, a tiny section of a bird's windpipe, some snake vertebrae, 2 burned bone fragments, some charred aspen, 2 quartz pebbles, a lump of clay, 2 pyrites, a bronze sheet, and a piece of bronze wire bent to make a hook, and a twig of rowan, the presence of which strongly hints at its magical protection and medicinal values to the sorceress. So this is like a well-known, I wish I had time to have done the research on that specific case right there, but apparently it was important enough that this woman who was significant enough, and this is just, it ties back to that feminine type of like nature that it has, but this woman was so significant that she was not only buried, but buried in a very ceremonial and significant way. And one of the items that either she or one of her acolytes or the people that she's worked with either experienced healing from Rowan or understood the power of it as a medicinal object or a spiritual object, that it ended up in the grave with her. And also it's interesting, the aspen's there too, which is one of my favorite Ogham trees. But yeah, so that is one thing that I loved reading about there, seeing it actually, I don't know, just in like a real world setting where somebody took it to like the grave with them. But moving forward, I'll try to make this one quick. I know I keep saying that, but the pairing herb that I have with this is actually mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris. And the thing about mugwort is it grows in literally every continent across the world, pretty much. I think you could even grow in Alaska, probably. Mugwort's protective and visionary qualities align with Rowan's guardianship. Both repel negativity and enhance intuition, best used by lunar folk, guided by their intuition as it grounds people and aligns the hemispheres of the brain for a focused and clear thought process. Great for dream work, and like I said, grows in every corner. I've had pretty crazy experiences using mugwort, and it's detailed that it's different people have different levels of susceptibility. Some people can just have like a previously burned smudging of it on their nightstand and it will have an effect on them, and other people, need to be like in a cloud of it in a way. But it's definitely for lunar individuals who are guided by intuition, and it can kind of help bring clarity to
If I had to
what.
guess, I would be more on the sensitive side of things. I say that because if I, like, for caffeine as an example, right? I usually only have green tea. That's like the only thing that I have that has any caffeine in it whatsoever. One time I tried black tea for the first time. It's delicious. I absolutely loved it. But after about half a cup's worth, I started to get jitters, and I told the person who made it for me that I can't have any more. I'm sorry. I was like, why? And I show him my hand shaking it, and I'm like, that's it. That's all I can do.
It's pretty crazy because I've cut a lot of things out of my diet in the past couple of years, and I've gone back and be like, it's here, it's being offered to me. I'll take like 2 or 3 sips, right? Like of some type of drink or whatever, right? And then I'll have not had it for years, and then I'll just be like first of all, the taste itself too, like ruining the palate with these carbonated things or whatever. But yeah, that's the thing. Our senses are incredibly overloaded by the stuff that we can just readily get, right? Like it's just like you get caffeine like out the ass. You could kill yourself with caffeine if you wanted to in America. I mean, in a lot
Oh,
of
yeah,
countries
easily.
actually.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, a big part of doing this herbal work is actually finding new levels of or recreating sensitivity, because the prescriptions that we get and all the stuff that we buy over the counter for colds and flus and trying to sleep and all this stuff, it's so powerful that we become reliant on it. And it makes our system so that we have to like nuclear bomb it every time we need to, get some sleep at night. Anyways, I'll get off of that, but talking about how it aligns the hemispheres of the mind, I thought that was an interesting
Cool.
interesting research. And during having that during sleep is pretty useful. But I would definitely give it a shot if you can get your hands on. Go to your next metaphysical shop and get a little mugwort. It's absolutely worth it. So I'll go over this medicinal uses. It helps with digestion, regulates menstrual cycles, promotes sweating to break fevers. Used in teas
You
for
even just said right there the menstrual cycle, so that goes back to the blood and the dropping of it again, and then of course being associated with the feminine. So just another.
I will say I do believe that is
I know it's for mugwort specifically, but it just like shows the pairing and how strong like the associations can be.
it actually, yeah, so it is that it can bring on labor, so it can induce the labor if it's going on late, but it can also be an abortive. It's also got the ability to do that as well,
Interesting.
which can tie into that blood
Yeah.
aspect of
Yeah.
Rowan. So for everyone out there, if you think you're pregnant, you're trying to stay pregnant, don't play with this too much. The thing about mugwort is that it can be used for just about everything. Like it can benefit everything in some small way if you find the right way to apply it. Like if you're and there's mugwort growing like literally around you everywhere. There's just different species of it. So if you're looking for a way to engage with an herb, and this is something that I actually came up in that book, The Heathen Golden Dawn, one of the first and best ways to access herb craft and knowledge, and being somebody that goes out and finds it, locally, like right out your back door. Research what type of mugwort grows in your area, because there's definitely a type that does, and you can start looking for that, bringing it home and doing research with that. Let's see. So it's a good introductory herb, and that also is represented in its ability to educate and have that lunar quality to it, guiding you intuitively in some way. But this was a sacred herb to the Celts. They obviously thought that it enhanced the psychic abilities and it protected against evil and aided in the astral travel that they would do, smudging and worn in amulets, and it's got ties to divination as well. In the Norse, this is actually one of the 9 sacred herbs and the Anglo-Saxon 9 herbs charm, and it's linked with Odin, and it's they're associated with wisdom and protection, burned as an incense to sanctify places in the Norse culture and heighten intuition. And that's one of the things that kept popping up, was that it was there for intuition.
Tuition.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, you're going on these journeys, right? You're traveling, or you're trying to find some sort of guidance or clarity or anything like that. It's Rowan and mugwort work great for that, because the mugwort kind of offers this clarity, this ability to do like otherworldly thought in some way. It's not a psychoactive thing. It's not like a mushroom or anything like that. But Rowan also has that ability to maintain protection and is sort of a safe place along journeys. And it's got a lot of great healing properties as well. But I do have here that it was great to be used. So the dream pillows. Yeah, if you're looking to do dream work, look up mugwort dream pillows. That's a good one to get started with. Yeah, offered basically in both cultures during Scyther and through a Druidic practice. It was used to kind of enhance any type of like rhythmic chanting in some way. It was a lot. It would, like, if you're doing that type of work where you're trying to create this sort of shamanic trance, mugwort's great for that because of its aligning properties. It's you know basically being able to bring the minds together. But that's all I got basically there for the mugwort. So we've gone over birch and stinging nettle, and rowan and mugwort. So you're looking at sort of like with birch. How would you describe what you've heard today, Nathaniel? If I made enough sense.
I would say that the pairing of the birch and the nettle go together in the sense that they're having to deal with similar properties like we talked about before with it, especially like with kind of like doing what is it, flogging? That's the term I was looking for. With it and having that go with that, and they both seem to be like, I don't want to use protection because it's more for the second one with it, the second grouping, but more like way showers, if you will, the beginning of stuff for what's going on there. And it's used for a lot of different things on that. And it's definitely associated with
I hope you
more.
didn't think I was trying to. I hope you didn't think I was like trying to quiz you or anything like
Oh,
that.
no, 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 no. I know you're not. No, I'm just trying to sum up what I've kind of heard and taken from what you're saying with it. So you have that side of things with it. On the other side with it, you have where the other two, which I actually know less about the Rowan to begin with, as well as Mugwort. I knew a little bit about Mugwort. I actually really liked what you were kind of telling me originally, looking at it from a masculine perspective, and then showing that it's more of a feminine thing within the ancient cultures, and then coming to the conclusions of why they kind of felt it that way, and then my bringing in like the Matroni as an idea and that kind of stuff with it, to me that kind of like cemented it for me as them being that particular thing with it. I think mugwort is just great regardless. Like there's so many things you could do with it. I know we're talking more of the tree on that, but I mean more of the herb than the tree on that. But yeah, I mean like mugwort was used for everything, even well beyond any pagan tradition. People were using mugwort and folk tradition way later than doing some of this other stuff with it. So,
Yeah, it was big, and like I said, in
and it's
the Druid,
everywhere, like you pointed out too. It's
it
practically everywhere.
is it is everywhere. It's called the mother. It's called the mother herb. It's like, or the mother of herbs, and in a few cases. But yeah, it was really popular in a lot of the First Nations tribes. Like it had a
Yeah.
huge significance there. But like I said, it can be used in, like, it's just a matter of how creative you want to be with it. So, and hopefully, if people are watching this and they like this, then you guys can comment and let me know. Maybe you can give me some more information, or you can join the Discord and you can try to drop some information in there. We've got a section on herbal healing and tree medicine and all that sort of stuff. But I think I'm probably going to wrap it up right about here. I only got through 2. So I thought I was going to get 5, and then I moved it down to 4. And I was like, all right, maybe we'll get 3 done. I didn't even get through 2. So maybe I'll find a better way to compress this information. I feel like I was trying to move fairly quickly, but we have some good ones coming up. And if people are watching and they want to do some research, I will give you a hint for the next one. The next one is actually the alder and comfrey. So we'll probably go over that in the next one if we don't have if everybody votes for the next section, or if we don't have another option, we can do that. But I like this right here because I can kind of fill this in when, like, I don't have an idea or something like that. Maybe I can have more weekly occurrences where I actually have some content to offer. But yeah, other than that, I think I'm going to go ahead and sign out. And I hope I get to see more people joining in and being a part of the conversation. Again, make sure you're using due diligence when working with herbs and stuff, because they can be dangerous, especially, like, just make sure you're being pretty thorough with your research. Finding books, the books I would recommend here, like I said, this one's a really controversial one. This one is the Northern Shamanic Herbal. All right. And this is by Raven Caldera. Now, people don't like Raven Caldera. A lot of people don't like this person. I won't really speak about their lives too much. I'm not going to slander them, because I will say I separate the art from the artist here. This individual has got some pretty amazing detail in the medicinal properties of all the plants listed, all the herbs and trees listed in this book right here. I really love this as a resource for getting into this whole process. So whatever people might say about Raven, they do a good job with their research. I'll give them that. Another interesting one that I found useful was the healing plants of the Celtic Druids. This is primarily just plants, but it does give pretty good cultural background and a pretty wide variety of things you'll find there. And then lastly, I'll leave off and say that if you're looking to, start doing a Golden Dawn path, there's the Celtic Golden Dawn by John Michael Greer, and then there's the Heathen Golden Dawn by Isaac Hill. Greer was a part of this as well. A great way to get involved in having spiritual, you'll develop your own over time. Like the Golden Dawn stuff kind of leads into developing your own spiritual practices. But if you're a heathen or a Celtic looking for ways to have some sort of magical or invite some sort of spiritual structure into your life involving magic, great places to start. Other than that, Nathaniel, is there anything else you want to say to all the watchers and listeners?
This is definitely your show and whatnot, and I gave my commentary on little bits that I did see. It was mostly lore related stuff as per usual. So
that's what it was supposed to be. I mean, honestly, yeah, some good insight, especially at the very beginning. I knew it was going to be good when you brought my awareness to the V with the Birch, which I saw so many on my trip to Michigan. But yeah, have you done your channel change yet, or is that still pending?
It's still pending, but we can make it. It's not, by the time this goes up, it'll be happening within a week or two. So grailsciences.com is what my website is. And then in terms of finding me on YouTube, it'll be Grail Sciences as well.
All right. Go check out Nathaniel. All right, everyone. Thanks for stopping in to Wathofraud. I will see you guys shortly. Come join the Discord and be a part of voting on what we're going to talk about and what you can be here talking about as well. All right. See you guys. Thank you.